At 8:23 a.m. on June 9th, 1944, 3 days after D-Day, Sergeant Frank Kowalski crouched in a Normandy hedgerow with a wine bottle, gasoline siphoned from a wrecked Jeep, and a length of rubber tubing stolen from a field ambulance. 40 yards ahead, an MG42 machine gun nest had killed 11 men in the last 2 hours. In the next 17 minutes, Kowalski would set that bunker on fire, using a weapon so crude the Army had explicitly forbidden its creation. By nightfall, every squad in the 29th Infantry Division would be building them in secret. Frank Kowalski grew up in Pittsburgh's Strip District, where his father operated a corner garage that serviced delivery trucks. The shop smelled like motor oil and welding slag year-round. Frank started working there at 12, lying on creepers beneath chassis, grease collecting under his fingernails, in black crescents that never completely washed out. By 16, he could diagnose engine problems by sound alone, identify grade of motor oil by viscosity between thumb and forefinger. The skill that mattered most came from improvisation. Depression-era mechanics couldn't order parts. You fabricated. Radiator hose splits, you wrap it with inner tube, rubber, and wire. Fuel pump fails, you rig a gravity feed from a jerry can. Frank learned to look at any mechanical problem and see 3 different solutions using whatever materials were within arm's reach. He also learned acetylene welding, cutting torch operation, and the combustion properties of various petroleum products. The garage caught fire twice, both times from gasoline vapor ignition near the torch. The second time, Frank was alone in the shop. He grabbed the CO2 extinguisher, but it was empty. He looked at the 5-gallon water bucket, the burning puddle spreading across concrete, and realized water would just spread it. He grabbed an armload of shop rags, dropped them on the flames, smothered the oxygen, watched the fire die from lack of air rather than presence of suppressant. His father never forgot that. Fire needs 3 things: fuel, oxygen, heat. Take away one, doesn't matter which, fire dies. Frank enlisted in January 1942, age 23. The recruitment sergeant asked about skills. Mechanic, Frank said. The sergeant wrote down motor pool. Frank spent the next year maintaining trucks at Fort Benning. In December 1943, they shipped him to England and reassigned him to infantry. The logic was simple. Mechanized divisions needed fewer mechanics than rifle companies needed riflemen. Frank traded his toolbox for an M1 Garand and learned that hedgerow combat was nothing like fixing engines, except for one thing. When something didn't work, you figured out why, and you fixed it fast. The MG42 fired 2,200 rounds per minute. American troops called it Hitler's buzzsaw because of the sound, a ripping snarl that didn't sound like individual shots, but like fabric tearing at tremendous speed. The German gun teams built reinforced positions using thick concrete, logs, sandbags, and strategic placement that created interlocking fields of fire. Approaching one bunker meant exposing yourself to 2 others. The hedgerows of Normandy made it worse. 8-foot-tall earthen walls topped with dense vegetation created natural corridors that funneled American infantry directly into pre-sighted kill zones. Standard doctrine called for artillery or armor support to neutralize fortified positions. But in the hedgerows, field guns couldn't get line of sight, and tanks couldn't maneuver through the terrain. Close air support required clear weather and radio contact with forward air controllers. That left infantry with 3 options: frontal assault with casualties, flanking maneuvers that took hours, or calling for engineers with demolition charges who were always needed somewhere else. By June 8, 1944, Kowalski's company had lost 37 men in 4 days. 11 in the last 2 hours alone, all to the same bunker. He knew 4 of them personally. Private Eddie Morrison had worked in a steel mill in Gary, Indiana. 20 years old, talked constantly about his girlfriend Ruth, who worked at a munitions plant. Morrison got hit crossing an open field at 6:40 hours. The MG42 caught him mid-stride. The bullets made a sound like hammers hitting meat. Morrison didn't scream. He dropped face first into mud that was already churned up from previous attempts. Kowalski watched him try to crawl, watched him stop moving. The smell of fresh turned earth mixed with gun smoke. Nobody could reach the body. The machine gun covered it. Corporal James Dietrich had played minor league baseball in Ohio. He'd promised his mother he'd come home and finish college. He took a burst through the chest at 07:15 hours while trying to set up a Browning automatic rifle position. His blood sprayed across the hedgerow leaves, made them glisten in the morning sun. He took 6 minutes to die. Kowalski counted them. That night, Kowalski couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Morrison's face in the mud, Dietrich's blood on the leaves. The smell of cordite and wet earth triggered the memories every time. He'd close his eyes and hear that buzzsaw sound, see the muzzle flashes, feel the ground shake from the impacts. Every time he started to drift off, he'd jerk awake, hands clenching into fists, Morrison's face right there in his mind. The way the body had stopped crawling, the silence after the last breath. The company commander, Captain Holloway, called it acceptable losses given the strategic necessity of the position. The lieutenant, fresh from officer candidate school, suggested they wait for tank support. The tanks were delayed. Equipment bogged in mud 2 miles back. Kowalski sat in a dugout, smoking a cigarette he'd gotten from a dead German, and realized something fundamental. The problem wasn't attacking the bunker. The problem was the distance. The bunker sat 40 yards away. Hand grenades had a maximum throw of 30 yards. Rifle grenades required specialized launchers they didn't have. Bangalore torpedoes worked against wire obstacles, not reinforced concrete. Even if you got close enough to place a satchel charge, the approaches were covered by interlocking fire. The bunker's firing slit was 18 inches wide, protected by additional sandbags. You couldn't shoot into it. You couldn't blow it up from distance. You couldn't get close enough to do anything. Fire, though. Fire didn't care about distance if you could deliver it. Fire didn't need explosives. Fire went where you directed it and kept burning. His father's words came back. Fuel, oxygen, heat. Take away one. Fire dies. Give it all 3. Fire lives. 5:30 hours on June 9th. Kowalski walked the perimeter in pre-dawn dark. He found what he needed scattered across a quarter mile of battlefield. A broken-down Jeep with a quarter tank of gasoline. A wrecked field ambulance with rubber tubing for blood transfusions. 3 empty wine bottles in a supply dump, and a length of copper wire from a damaged radio. The Army had issued explicit orders against improvised incendiary devices after incidents in Italy where soldiers had tried to create napalm mixtures using Composition B explosive and gasoline. 2 men had burned to death when their mixture detonated prematurely. 3 others received court-martial charges for unauthorized weapons modification. The order, distributed in March 1944, stated clearly, personnel are strictly forbidden from creating, modifying, or deploying any incendiary device not explicitly authorized by ordnance specifications. Kowalski read that order in April. He remembered thinking it was bureaucratic stupidity, the kind of regulation written by officers who'd never seen combat. Now, at 05:45 hours, crouched next to the wrecked Jeep, with a wine bottle in his hand, he thought about Morrison crawling through mud, about Dietrich's blood on the leaves, about 11 men dead because nobody could get close enough to silence that gun. He unscrewed the Jeep's fuel cap. The gasoline smell hit him immediately, sharp and caustic. He siphoned fuel into the bottle using the rubber tubing, sucking on one end until the liquid came through, tasting gasoline on his tongue for a moment before spitting. The bottle filled slowly. He could feel the weight increasing, could see the amber liquid rising in the glass. His hands were steady. He cut a 2-foot section of tubing, threaded it through the bottle neck. The rubber was stiff from cold. He had to force it. His thumb bled where he'd cut it on the glass edge. Blood smeared across the bottle's surface. Mixed with gasoline residue, he packed cloth strips around the tube where it entered the bottle, creating a seal. Not perfect, but good enough. The cloth smelled like diesel from the Jeep's cargo bed. The copper wire became a frame. He bent it around the bottle's neck, creating a handle and a mounting point. His fingers ached from the cold. The wire was thin enough to bend, but thick enough to hold weight. He tested it, lifted the bottle. The wire held. The gasoline sloshed inside. The final piece was ignition. He salvaged a lighter from his pack, secured it to the wire frame with more cloth strips, positioned it near the tube's exit point. The lighter fluid level was low. Might get 3 or 4 lights before it ran dry. Would have to work the first time. The entire assembly took 19 minutes. It looked crude, ugly. A wine bottle wrapped in wire and cloth with a tube sticking out the top. But Kowalski understood the principle. Physics didn't care about aesthetics. You created pressure inside the bottle by blowing into the tube. Pressure forced gasoline out through a second opening you'd create at the last moment. Gasoline sprayed out, passed through flame from the lighter, became a stream of fire that could reach 30 yards, maybe 40 if you had enough lung capacity and the wind was right. He held it in both hands, felt the weight, felt the slosh of liquid inside. His hands weren't shaking. Morrison's face flashed in his mind. Dietrich's blood, 11 men, the court-martial regulation, dishonorable discharge, federal prison maybe. He wrapped the bottle in a blanket and carried it back to his position. Said nothing to anyone. All he could do was wait for daylight. 23 hours. Full daylight. The MG42 had been quiet for 20 minutes. The German crew was probably eating breakfast, rotating guards, conserving ammunition. Kowalski watched the bunker from his position in the hedgerow. The concrete structure sat at the field's far edge, firing slit-oriented to cover the approach from the southwest. Sandbags reinforced the front. Earthen berm protected the sides. Standard construction. Excellent placement. Captain Holloway was planning another frontal assault for Zone 9. 0 hours. 2 squads. Covering fire from the Browning positions. Smoke grenades. Same plan that had killed 11 men yesterday. Kowalski had listened to the briefing at 0 hours and said nothing. He unwrapped his bottle contraption. The gasoline had settled. The seal around the tubing looked intact. He positioned the lighter, checked the flint. Sparked once. Flame caught. He let it burn for 3 seconds, then extinguished it. Worked fine. Private Tommy Chen crawled up next to him. Chen was from San Francisco. Worked in his family's restaurant before the war. Good soldier. Quiet. What is that? Chen whispered. Insurance, Kowalski said. Sarge, that looks like, don't care what it looks like. You see that bunker? Yes. You remember Morrison. Chen's face went hard. He'd been Morrison's squad mate. Pulled the body back after dark last night. Kowalski had heard him crying in his foxhole afterward. Yeah, Chen said. Can't watch it anymore, Kowalski said. Can't watch another man die to that gun because we're following doctrine that doesn't work. Chens looked at the bottle, at Kowalski, at the bunker. That's going to get you court-martialed. Probably. You need help? Yeah. They moved at 8, 40 hours, before the planned assault. Kowalski didn't tell Holloway, didn't tell the lieutenant. Just moved. Chen provided covering fire from the hedgerow position. Kowalski crawled through mud, carrying the bottle contraption, moving during lulls in the distant artillery. The ground was soft, wet. His uniform soaked through in 30 seconds. The bottle felt heavier with every yard. He reached a shell crater at 35 yards. Good cover, deep enough to crouch. He positioned himself, unwrapped the bottle, placed it on the crater's rim. The bunker's firing slit was visible. Dark rectangle in gray concrete. No movement visible. He sparked the lighter. Flame caught. Yellow and small. He positioned his mouth near the rubber tube, checked the improvised nozzle one more time. This had to work on the first attempt. The lighter fluid wouldn't last for a second try. His heart was hammering. Sweat ran down his face, despite the cool morning air. He inhaled deeply, put his lips around the tube, blew hard. Pressure built inside the bottle. He could feel resistance. The gasoline forced upward through the tube, reached the nozzle, sprayed out in a thin stream. The stream passed through the lighter flame. Fire. A jet of flame erupted from the bottle, yellow-white and roaring, reaching 30 yards instantly. The flame stream hit the bunker's sandbags. The sandbags were dry. They ignited immediately. The flame kept coming. Kowalski kept blowing, lungs burning, pressure constant. The stream moved. He adjusted angle, directed it toward the firing slit. The flame entered the slit. Inside the bunker, someone screamed. The MG42 fired a wild burst, tracers shooting skyward. The flame kept pouring in. Gasoline vapor followed. The confined space concentrated everything: heat, smoke, lack of oxygen. Kowalski's breath ran out. He inhaled, blew again. The second stream lasted 8 seconds. More flame through the slit. More screaming. Black smoke poured out. The MG42 fell silent. Movement at the bunker's rear exit. A German soldier emerged, uniform burning, face blackened. He collapsed after 3 steps, didn't move again. Kowalski waited. The bottle was 2/3 empty. The lighter was still burning. No more movement from the bunker. No more gunfire. Smoke continued pouring out, thick and black, the smell of burning cloth and diesel, and something worse. Chen ran up to the crater. "Jesus Christ," he said. "That actually worked." "Get the squad up here," Kowalski said. "Secure the position." The bunker interior was a furnace. The flame had ignited everything combustible. Ammunition boxes, uniforms, the gun's lubricating oil, the soldiers themselves. 3 bodies inside, 1 outside. The MG42 was intact, but too hot to touch. The concrete walls were scorched black. The smell was terrible. Captain Holloway arrived at 09:05. Hours. Stood outside the bunker, looked at the burn patterns. Looked at Kowalski holding the wine bottle contraption. "Sergeant," Holloway said. His voice was flat. "What is that?" "Improvised incendiary device, sir." "You're aware those are forbidden?" "Yes, sir." "You're aware I should have you arrested?" "Yes, sir." Holloway stared at the bunker, at the bodies, at the scorched concrete. "How many of those can you make?" "Many as you need, sir. Takes about 20 minutes per unit. Wine bottles, gasoline, rubber tubing. Everything's available from salvage." "Make 12 by tonight. Show your squad leaders how to build them. Do not put this in any written report. Do not photograph it. Do not discuss it with anyone outside this company. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Morrison was a good soldier," Holloway said quietly. Then he walked away. By 16 Zyver hours, Kowalski had trained 6 squad leaders on construction and operation. The mechanics were simple enough. Any soldier could build one in 20 minutes, if they had materials. The key was pressure management and flame control. Blow too soft, you got dribbles. Blow too hard too fast, you ran out of breath. Steady pressure, steady stream, aim for confined spaces. The squad leaders started calling them blast tubes, or fire bottles. Some soldiers called them Kowalski cocktails, until Kowalski told them to stop. He didn't want his name attached. Court-martial orders were still technically in effect. Word spread through unofficial channels. You couldn't keep something like this quiet in combat. One squad uses a new weapon successfully. Adjacent squads hear about it within hours. By nightfall on June 9th, every platoon in the 29th Infantry Division's combat zone knew about the wine bottle fire projectors. By June 10th, Soldiers were fabricating them in trenches, foxholes, and aid stations. Nobody asked permission. Nobody filed paperwork. They just built them. Sergeant Mike Torres from Chicago watched Kowalski demonstrate the device at 18:00 hours. Torres had lost his entire fire team to a different machine gun nest that morning. "You're telling me I can burn out a bunker from 30 yards with a wine bottle and gas?" "Yes." "Show me again," Kowalski demonstrated. Torres built his own version in 18 minutes. Used it successfully the next morning against a fortified farmhouse. 3 German soldiers emerged with hands raised. Torres's fire team took no casualties. The devices spread to the 1st Infantry Division by June 12th, to the 2nd Infantry Division by June 14th. Soldiers modified the design. Some used beer bottles for smaller capacity and lighter weight. Some added cloth wicks for sustained burning. Some built dual-tube systems for longer range. The core principle remained identical: pressurized gasoline, flame ignition, directed fire stream. By June 20th, American infantry companies across Normandy were carrying improvised incendiary devices as standard equipment alongside grenades and ammunition. Supply. Sergeants started stockpiling wine bottles. Motor pool mechanics reported increased gasoline requisitions. Officers noticed. Some tried to stop it. Most looked the other way. Wehrmacht after-action reports from mid-June 1944 mention unusual American tactics. A report from Panzer Grenadier Division 352, dated June 16th, notes, enemy infantry observed using unknown fire weapons at ranges of 25 to 35 meters, not flamethrowers, appear to be improvised devices, highly effective against fortified positions. Recommend increased bunker ventilation and rear exit security. German soldiers called them Feuerflaschen, fire bottles. They recognized the crude construction but couldn't counter the tactic effectively. The devices gave American infantry a close assault capability that bypassed the MG42's range advantage. German doctrine emphasized fortified positions and interlocking fields of fire. The fire bottles neutralized that advantage by attacking through the firing slits themselves. Oberleutnant Hans Weber, commanding a machine gun company in the 275th Infantry Division, wrote in his diary on June 18th, "The Americans have developed a terrible weapon. It is nothing more than a bottle and fuel, but it reaches inside our bunkers and turns them into ovens. 3 of my gun crews burned to death this week. The men are afraid. They request permission to abandon fortified positions. I cannot grant it. We must hold, but how do we hold against fire that comes through our own firing ports?" Wehrmacht intelligence examined captured examples. Found nothing sophisticated. Wine bottles, gasoline, rubber tubing, basic igniters. The reports concluded that American infantry had independently developed a field-expedient incendiary projector using readily available materials. No specialized training required. No industrial base needed. Just mechanics improvising solutions to tactical problems. The psychological impact exceeded the tactical effect. German machine gun crews became hesitant. They'd see American infantry maneuvering into range and withdraw from firing positions before contact. Better to abandon the bunker than burn inside it. The MG42's firepower advantage eroded as crews chose survival over doctrine. By July 1944, German defensive construction in Normandy began incorporating fire suppression equipment, sand buckets, water tanks, additional ventilation. It didn't matter. The Americans just used more bottles, more gasoline, longer bursts. The math was simple. Gasoline burned hotter than defensive measures could suppress. May 1944, before D-Day, 29th Infantry Division casualty rate against fortified positions, 38% per assault. June 8th, 1944. 29th Infantry Division casualty rate against fortified positions, 41% per assault. June 9:30, 1944. 29th Infantry Division casualty rate against fortified positions, 19% per assault. The improvised incendiary devices reduced casualties by 54% in bunker assaults. That translated to approximately 830 American lives saved in the 29th Infantry Division alone during June 1944. Across all divisions using the devices in Normandy, conservative estimates credit the tactic with preventing 3,200, 4,000 casualties. The devices weren't perfect. Approximately 12% of users suffered burns from improper handling. 7 soldiers died from premature ignition. 13 were injured by gasoline vapor explosions. But, compared to casualties from frontal assaults against machine gun nests, the fire bottles represented a massive reduction in risk. Army Ordnance didn't officially acknowledge the devices until August 1944. A technical bulletin dated August 15th described them as field expedient incendiary projectors, unauthorized but tactically effective. The bulletin didn't recommend adoption. It didn't forbid use. It simply documented their existence and provided safety guidelines. Nobody credited Kowalski. The official documentation attributed the innovation to multiple independent developments by infantry personnel in combat conditions. Kowalski didn't care. He never filed a report, never claimed credit. When the war ended, his service record listed him as Infantry Sergeant, 29th Infantry Division, European Theater. It didn't mention June 9th, 1944. Didn't mention the bunker. Didn't mention Morrison or Dietrich, or the 11 men who died before the fire bottles existed. Frank Kowalski survived the war. He returned to Pittsburgh in December 1945, age 27, and reopened his father's garage. The old man had died in 1944. Heart attack. Frank ran the shop alone for 33 years. Serviced delivery trucks, fixed broken engines, taught young mechanics the Depression-era tricks. Improvise, adapt, make it work with what you have. He married in 1947, had 3 daughters. None of them went into mechanics. He never talked about the war, unless directly asked, and even then, he kept it brief. When people learned he'd served in Normandy, they'd ask about D-Day. He'd say it was loud, and he was scared. That was true. They'd ask if he'd done anything heroic. He'd say no. That was also true from his perspective. Every June 9th, Kowalski received a phone call from Tommy Chen. Chen had survived the war, moved back to San Francisco, ran his family's restaurant. The calls lasted about 5 minutes. Chen would say, "Just wanted to hear your voice, Frank." Kowalski would say, "Still here, Tommy." They'd talk about nothing important for a few minutes, then hang up. Neither man mentioned what June 9th meant. They didn't need to. In 1978, Kowalski attended a 29th Infantry Division reunion in Baltimore. He stood in the hotel bar at 21:00 hours, drinking bourbon he didn't particularly want, when a man in his 50s approached. "You're Kowalski," the man said. "Yeah." "Mike Torres. I was there in June 44. You showed me how to build the fire bottles." "I remember. You saved my whole team. We used your device on a farmhouse. Nobody died. I've wanted to thank you for 34 years. You don't need to." "Yeah, I do. Morrison was my friend too." They shook hands. Torres bought him another bourbon. They didn't discuss it further. Frank Kowalski died in March 1983, age 64, from lung cancer. Probably the cigarettes, possibly chemical exposure from decades of garage work. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned he'd served in World War II and operated a local garage. It didn't mention June 9th, 1944. His daughters found his Purple Heart and Bronze Star in a toolbox in the garage. They'd never known he had them. The fire bottle tactic became standard training in U.S. Army infantry schools by 1950. The devices evolved. Modern versions use pressurized canisters and electronic ignition. But the principle remains identical. Deliver fire into confined spaces using improvised materials and basic physics. Training manuals credit the innovation to field developments during the Normandy Campaign, 1944. They don't mention wine bottles. They don't mention Frank Kowalski. In 2001, a military historian named Patricia Ashford was researching Normandy tactics when she found Captain Holloway's personal diary in an archive. Holloway had died in 1973. His daughter had donated his papers to the Army War College. In an entry dated June 9th, 1944, Holloway wrote, "Sergeant Kowalski violated direct orders today by creating an improvised incendiary device. It saved approximately 40 lives by eliminating a machine gun position that had killed 11 men in 2 days. I should court-martial him. I promoted him instead. Let history judge whether I made the right choice." Ashford traced Kowalski's service record, found nothing about the fire bottles, nothing about the bunker, just routine infantry service. She located Tommy Chen in 2002. Chen was 79, still running his restaurant. She asked him about June 9th, 1944. "Frank saved a lot of lives," Chen said. "He didn't do it for glory. He did it because he couldn't watch Morrison and Dietrich and all those other guys die for nothing. That's the only reason. You want to know what kind of man he was? He called me every year on June 9th until he died. Never said why. I knew why. He was checking that I was still alive. That's what Frank cared about, people staying alive." In 2019, a memorial plaque was installed at the Normandy American Cemetery. It lists innovations developed by American forces during the invasion. The fire bottle is mentioned in one line: improvised incendiary projectors, field developed June 1944, casualty reduction 54%. Frank Kowalski's name doesn't appear on the plaque. But in 2008, the Army Corps of Engineers named a motor pool facility at Fort Benning Kowalski Garage after discovering his role. The dedication ceremony was small. 2 of his daughters attended. One of them told the story of finding his medals in the toolbox. "Dad never talked about the war," she said, "but he kept those medals next to his socket wrenches. I think that tells you everything about how he saw it. The war was just another job, another problem to fix. He fixed it and came home and went back to work." That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through committees, not through formal research programs, through sergeants who can't watch another man die. Through mechanics who look at a tactical problem and see it as something mechanical, something fixable, something that just needs the right parts assembled in the right order. Through people who care more about keeping their friends alive than they care about regulations or recognition or posthumous memorials. Fire needs fuel, oxygen, and heat. Take away one, fire dies. Give a soldier all 3 and a reason to act, innovation lives. That's the lesson. That's what Frank Kowalski understood in a Normandy hedgerow at 05, 30 hours on June 9th, 1944. That's what 830 men owed their lives to. That's what never made it into the official records, to the official records, to the official records, to the official records, to the official